All right, guys, what is going on? My name is Talon. This is my buddy Jason. Welcome back to another exciting, awesome, super interesting episode of Dad Debate. Jason, are you ready to jump into it?
Yeah, I am, man. First of all, it
Yeah,
was great to see you last week, bro.
yeah, I was just about to say that, man. Super awesome to see you. It's one of those things where I was telling someone the other day that I feel like Laguna is such a special place, and that even people that you're like sort of friends with, I mean, obviously we're good friends, but I mean people like that are friends of friends, like you could run into them somewhere and you could basically, it's like you guys are best buds and you pick up where you left off. And I'm only saying like friends of friends because it just shows you kind of like the strength of Laguna and how cool it is to come from a community like that.
Sure.
Because obviously Jason and I are good friends, so it's a little different, and that's obvious that we'd pick up where we left off. But it's just a really cool thing, especially to see like our lives change, with like wives and kids and houses and mortgage payments and business. And it's just a wild thing, man. It's wild.
It's got
But
to be trippy for you, dude, coming back, especially from Nebraska and stuff. Because what, you come back about a couple times a year?
yeah, we try to come back like at least 2 times a year. Usually there's one special occasion, like because all our friends are getting married obviously later in their lives. So it seems like every year there's like a wedding I have to go to. So there's usually like two. We don't do we what we don't do though is we don't do Christmas. We do Christmas here.
Hmm.
So I don't come back for the holidays just because we kind of made this conscious decision to give Bronson until he stops believing in Santa Claus to kind of like I feel like by going to my parents' house, it would be hard for us to like, I'm back and forth on it. Like if I had a sick place in Aspen, I'd probably be like, Danielle, we're going to Aspen. And that's just,
Yeah.
like, but we don't have a sick place in Aspen. But
That's going to be a good topic that I think we should talk about after.
yeah, no, for sure. That would be definitely a good one. This week's one that I'm gonna throw at you is an interesting one because of course I just went to California and I flew on a plane. And for those of you that don't know this about me, I'm terrified of flying. I suffer from crazy amounts of anxiety flying.
I didn't know that.
I've gotten a lot better. I mean, you wouldn't even know, right? But yeah, like I'm not like afraid of like the plane crashing. It's just more like, now with COVID and stuff, it's like can't cough. Well, like one of my tics when I'm nervous is I cough. So it's like I can't cough. I'm nervous. I'm on a plane. Like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do?
Ah!
And I don't know why I'm afraid. I'm not afraid of it crashing. I'm more afraid of just like I don't like long road trips. I don't like sitting in cars for a long time. I just think like I don't know why I get so anxious. But the point is of my story is that I fly with my son, right? And kind of the thing I'm throwing out today is this idea that we all had a time in our life when we found out that our parents were humans, right? Like, where like they have problems too. They have feelings too. Like they're not just like superheroes, right? Like I think when you're kids, you look up as your parents as like a safety net, as superheroes, like in a sense of like, you know, they don't have anything wrong with them, right? And then you come to this conclusion, you find out that they do have problems and they do are human, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it kind of makes you like, I don't know, it's interesting. So with that in mind, plus this idea, like, I don't know how much I believe this, but like some people believe that like your kids can inherit some of your traits or your problems,
For
right?
sure.
Like anxiety, right? Like is anxiety a learned behavior or is anxiety a mental or not a mental like you obviously know a lot more about this stuff. Is it more of like a chemical imbalance that you're born with
Pre-genetically disposed to it.
that then comes out when you get older, right? So that's not really what I want to talk about. Obviously a lot of this, but let's just say that like inheriting bad traits. So mine would be like on a plane is freaking out, right? So
Right.
so being next to my son, I really put on a brave face to not freak out. So
Right.
so I know this is a super weighted, like difficult question, but I'm coming around to it, which is what's your stance as a dad trying to hide negative traits, behaviors, feelings, thoughts from your children? And with that in mind, like, is it okay to kind of show some vulnerability in front of your kids, right? Because
Great.
again, like I said, would you inherit, like, does now you're not a human, now you're a human to your kid, right? Like, oh, my dad has anxiety, right? Like he's not the safety net that I wanted, right? So just, I know that's like kind
Great.
of
No, it's a great question.
but would love, like, don't feel free to take it where you want to take it, right?
Great question. And it's something that, that I've looked at, hard and personally. I mean, one was obviously having an addiction and seeing, how that can really manifest into, your life and what's going on. And I think just taking that, for example, because it resonates. And I know a lot of people that have been in an addiction and how it really is cycled through. And I know that's a much deeper issue than what you're talking about being on a plane and these surface.
No, but you know what though? Like, let's talk about that. I think there's a lot of people out there that really relate to you a lot and look to you as like someone that they can, being a voice of power in terms of like, people need someone like you to kind of, help them through what they're going through. I think relating to someone is so important. I know for my anxiety, finding out that other people had anxiety was like huge for me. Like I thought I was the only one in the whole world that had it. So like, let's touch on that. So like,
well, so I'll just give you a personal example. Like for me is like, I want to be in my family. There's a lot of people that struggle with addiction or some form of mental health or something like that. And, I want to break the cycle in my family. This is going to be a generation that the cycle breaks. And I'm going to make sure that it's, for me, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that Delilah grows up in a safe, structured environment. And like, not saying my parents didn't have a safe, structured environment, but my grandparents were alcoholics. Some of my siblings struggle with addiction. Like there's, extended family struggles and stuff like that. And it's just like it's crazy because I got to see how it's impacted different dynamics within my own family. Like I said, I'm so grateful that I have my parents and my mom and dad because they've had structure. They've had, they raised us with good morals, good values, and they instilled that. And I think that's what really helped me draw back into recovery later on down in life, where I've seen other people in my family who have had really, really dysfunctional lives due to addiction. And there was no structure. There was no stability. And I've seen that a lot. There's a lot of friends. I'm not going to name people that we've grown up with that have parents that struggled and they did not have that sense of safety. Right. So that's something for me personally, like on a very deep level where I really, it's a big turning point. If I ever get like a temptation or, I want to turn to using or having a drink or something like that, I always I think of Delilah, and I think about like how I want to be a really good example and how I don't want to ever show that. So that's one piece of it, but also to the other factor of what you're saying, just like on the surface, whether it's even just like, arguments with your wife or, dealing with stressful and stuff around work, I try to limit that. I don't want my daughter to think that there's no issues in life. I don't want to create this false sense of reality and this fantasy.
That's a good point.
But I also I'm mindful of it. You know what I mean? Like Ashley and I, one thing that we really focused on in our parenting thing is that we're a unit and we can never show that there's a dismantle between that because kids I've seen now having, there's people in my family again in their teenage years that are creating a wedge between the parents because they know where to get through. So I think for that, like in my own home, like when it comes to Ashley and I, like that's a place where we're going to try extra hard not to create argue, fight, create a separation. But when it comes to our own vulnerability of frustration, 100% we let our kids know that. Like for Delilah, like if we're frustrated, we're like, Delilah, we need a few minutes. You know what I mean? We let her know and we try not to take that out on her. And, are we perfect? Absolutely not. There's times that you get frustrated and things like that when you have a lot going on and there's stress. But I think it's a balancing act. I think it's important to exhibit and explain emotions because that's the thing is we don't want to also create this environment that is not realistic. And because when they get into that and they start to experience those things, I think we're just setting them up for failure. So I personally,
that's a great point. Like, I didn't think about that. Like, I guess anxiety is a little different, but like, I think me and my wife suffer from anxiety a lot. And so for us, like, it's not necessarily because we believe like kids inherit anxiety or we believe like that you develop it, whatever we believe, right? The point is that we know how debilitating it is. And so our biggest concern is like, how do we prevent him from having that? Right. And like, so it's just an interesting thing.
No, it is, but it's also, I think, equipping people with tools, you know what I mean? Right. And I think it's like, it's not trying to avoid if something comes up. I think for us is Delilah's pre-genetically disposed of she's got a 50% chance of having addiction. You know what I mean? And that's something we can't hide from. And again, as I grew up with, you know, how bad my OCD was. I used to wash my hands till they bleed in like 6th grade. And like, I had anxiety, depression. There was a lot of things that I'd had. My parents really did the best at that time that was with what was out there to help me, you know, to overcome those things. But today there's a lot more around that. I'm not saying let's encourage and support that. It's more of like, how can
No, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, it's interesting. Parents, like, you know, like our parents were only given the tools they were given. Like eating healthy when we were kids was like microwave lunches, right? Or like Lunchables was like considered like somewhat healthy.
I thought
right?
it was healthy.
You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
like, I guess the point that I'm making is like our parents are only given the tools that they're given. Like when our kids have their kids, like they'll be like so much more things. They're like, Dad, I can't believe you fed me this, or Dad, I can't believe you handled this like this. When we have this now, and I'm like, well, dude, that's what we had when we had. You know, like
Yeah.
I gave you the best what we had when we had it, and that's just what.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the beauty of this, and that's where, to your point, I think there is a balancing act to it, and there's a lot of kids are exposed to stuff outside of even our house, right? And so I think that's the thing is understanding we can't have this perfect. You can have a sanctuary where it's home for sure, but it's also a place to be able to process that and get educated for when you do go out into the real world, because we can't just keep a container around them the whole time. So again, it's a balancing act for me. I think it's important to provide. Again, we got 3-year-olds, you know, 2.5, 3-year-olds here, and it's something to be mindful of, though. But we are very, very mindful around not creating tension within the house. We want it to be a safe place, but we also exhibit, like when we're going through a time, like we let Delilah know what it is we're going through, and whether she can comprehend it or not, we're planting the seeds.
Life is a freaking difficult thing to navigate, dude. So complex.
It's a lot more challenging, dude. And I think just jumping in real quick for my last week, it's been fun. We bought a new house, which has been really exciting. So this week, I you know, I don't know if parents go through this or not, but it was something that I went through. Delilah has basically been here since she was born, you know what I mean? And she's we had a place prior to this, but she was there for like 4 months, so she had no idea where we were. But so this is really home for her, right? And I know it's only been 2.5 years, so I was kind of like, God, is she gonna like freak out, or like, you know, is she gonna not like it?
Does she have friends in the neighborhood and stuff? Or?
Not really. I mean, we live, you know, where we live now. Unfortunately, there's a lot like there's people who are antisocial over here, and
Yep.
And but I mean, our neighbors are great. They have older kids, great people and stuff, but there's nobody really her age over here. And she goes to school in Laguna. And for us, we wanted to get into a more neighborhood, and we want to have a bigger place, bigger yard, pool. We wanted to kind of have that as we grow our family. But I was kind of worried that when she got over there, she's advanced, you know what I mean? Like she fully knows what's going on, like new house, where we're headed. And I thought she was going to trip out and stuff, but we went over there, and you know, it's a much better. I like it a lot more. It's a sick house. It's much better.
It's not like you're in a situation where, you know, her best friend lives next door and you're downgrading, right? Like it's not, when I say downgrading, like I mean like you're not like you lost your job and you're now going to move from a beachfront mansion to, you know, 1-bedroom apartment. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of like I remember when my mom and dad got divorced. My mom bought that house in Newport Coast. Do you remember that house?
Yeah.
And like, so when she got divorced, she like ended up building like, you know, water slides and got like 2 Great Danes and a dog run and like, you know, fire pits. And like, you know, I get it at the time. She was probably really just trying to make us happy given the circumstances of a divorce. But it was kind of exciting in a weird way just to like be in this new house, right? Like, so I think like, I don't have the answer because I'm not moving yet. I am soon. So I'm going to be leaning on you to how to do it. But I assume like if you involve them in like painting their room or like, you know, whatever, you know, they get excited too, you know? So,
well, it was really cool. Cause we basically, we went over there cause we own the place now and we're still at this place, but we show her. So what I'm getting at though is almost every single day she makes us drive over to the house to see her new room. She loves it. She like can't wait to get out of here. So which I totally thought, to be honest, was the opposite. Cause she's got so many memories here. She loves it here. So it was an interesting transition, but it ended up obviously working out for our benefit.
She's not moving schools, right?
Not moving schools, no.
That's important, right? Like I could imagine like it being kind of traumatizing if you're moving schools. Like if you were moving everything, schools, friends, house, like I could see that being a traumatic experience for a kid for sure.
Well,
Um,
that's, and the reason I bring this up though is because, again, I understand Delilah is very young, but that's something that really toyed with Ashley, is because when she's young, she moved a lot. And that really kind of, and again, we're not planning on moving from here for a long time.
I
So
get
that's
it,
different,
yeah,
but it's important to talk about because there's a lot with schools and different things like that. It's something to look at. And I think a lot of, this, when we had new people come to Laguna, there was just in high school and stuff, there were struggles that came through with that, but I don't know. It was good. So
no,
what's our,
that's a good. Well, real quick. I mean, that's a good point. I would say like the keys that I take away from that are like I think as parents, our jobs are to just kind of like not overthink situations, but take a moment to pause and think like, well, how could this affect my son or daughter? Or, and it's not like you need to like go above and beyond, but I think sometimes as parents, we're so like caught up in just like the day-to-day stuff that we forget like, whoa, this move, although it's exciting for us, could actually be something that could be, traumatizing, it might be a pretty overzealous word, but like traumatizing for our kids, right?
because
But
even at 3, but kids are most susceptible at 2 to 3 years old. That's why I'm like, because that's where it's like, we don't know it's really happening to them. You know what I mean? When they're in that stage, like it could be, that's where that fear came from.
for sure. All right. Well, this week's topic came from a guy on YouTube. Super interesting. So the topic was really, the question was, are do you guys have the same religions as your wife? And if so, how do you incorporate those religions and traditions into holidays? Well, Jason and I both, our wives share the same religions as ourselves. So we can't answer the beginning of that question because we don't have experience in it. But we can do is I'm going to ask Jason this question. Just a nice, short, sweet answer is obviously you and your wife have different traditions when it comes to holidays from family stuff. How do you guys incorporate that? Or, what do you
Great
guys do?
question, dude.
What do you guys do on the holidays? Like, what are some cool things you do?
Well,
Whatever.
and it's good. It's a great question, I think, for us because our family lives close enough, but far enough to where it makes it challenging. I mean, we're not just down the road from each other. All my family lives in Orange County. Ashley's family lives in Northern California. So it was, we both come from very big tradition families, like, Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas. I mean, it's all like Christmas Eve. Like we literally had the same setup, and we're like, I was like, you're coming with my family. She's like, no, you're coming with my family. And so it was a really challenging thing for the first couple of years, because we both, and it was really cool that we both had that. But what we ended up, we had to compromise.
Oh, that's a great point. Hanging out with your wife's family or your family.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
I was always like, you're coming with me, we're going here. And it was more of like, we both didn't want to separate. So, I mean, I think there was even some in the very beginning where she went with her family and I went with mine, in the early stages of us date, because we dated for a couple of years before we got married. But when we got married, and again, I feel like that happened. I'd have to ask her. But what we ended up doing is it's basically we just switched off every year, So like
Okay.
Thanksgiving we do at my family's, and the
Yeah.
next Thanksgiving would be at her family's, and same thing with Christmas, same thing with Easter. And
Yeah.
now that we have a child, and now that we've, a lot of what we do is we make sure we just celebrate the holidays at our house because we want to create a lot of our own traditions. And quite frankly, a lot of our traditions were broken when both of our grandparents died, because both of them were the patriarchs, and they both died within 6 months of each other. So everything was always hosted at her grandparents. Everything was always hosted at my grandparents. And when they passed, it honestly 5 years ago, everything, traditions and everything started to just dissipate. And, my parents picked it up for a while and wanted to do it. But Ashley and I are actually taking that on to have everybody now start
No,
coming to us.
Jason's a huge tradition guy. I mean, I thought it was the coolest thing. We went over to Jason's house for my son's birthday was like the day before or 2 days later, and Jason handed my son a wad of $2 bills. And I remember someone in my life, like probably my dad's dad or something like that, my grandpa, gave it to me, gave me the same thing. And I just thought, you know what, like you got to start that somewhere. I hope that you do that for kids, for the rest of your life, because as crazy as it sounds, like kids will remember that. Kids will remember like, dude, Jason, Uncle Jason or Grandpa Jason gives out $2 bills. It's so, when I was a kid, and it was so cool. And I know that I brought that up because I know you said like your grandpa or something did that as well. And sometimes it's the littlest things, and going to holidays. Like, yeah, my wife and I, we celebrate Christmas at our house in Nebraska, and we try to go back for Thanksgiving every other year to California. But when we go to California, we try to go for like 2 weeks at a time. So we spend like a month in California to a month and a half a year. In regards to traditions, my dad is a huge tradition guy. I'm not talking like sit down, light candles, this and that, but like Christmas Eve is a very formal time. I'm a very laid back guy. I drink light beer, like I'm a laid back, burger and dog kind of guy. But on Christmas Eve, we do the Feast of the Seven Fishes. So it's an Italian thing where you cook 7 different types of fish. We've taken on the role of hosting it at our house. We have, I pull out my grandma's linens and we light candles, and, we say a quick prayer, and we have a good time and conversate. And, my belief when it comes to holidays is that anybody can come over. If you don't have a place to go, you can come over. So some years there's some of Danielle's friends. Some years there's, they're not there. Just if that year you don't have a place to go, you need to come over. Like, I don't want someone to sit at home by themselves and, just do their thing, unless that's what they want to do. And yeah, my wife's family's not super big on tradition. Not that they're not super big. I think because all of her grandparents are alive, they don't really I think they lean on them to carry traditions. But once they pass on, they'll realize how important it is to carry those traditions. So, but with that in mind, and that being said, traditions, I believe, are the one thing that tie generations together. The longer that you can keep that tradition alive, the longer that person lives on, right? Like my grandma would make, on Christmas Eve or day, we make her famous lamb with peas, right? And so it's a story I tell every Christmas. Everyone's like, gosh dang it, Talan, you've told the story 1,000 times, but I'm going to tell it again, right? About this is my grandma's peas and she makes it, la, 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 la. Because, it keeps people alive. So
I love that though, because that's the relatability here is Ashley's there. She's Italian. They do the 7 fishes, and it's something that she's carried on ever since her grandparents died.
The pain in the butt. I was, when you're a kid, it's like, oh, this is great. I'll just eat all this food and not do anything. Now I'm like, oh my God, it costs a fortune and it takes me 7 hours and it's a nightmare. But it's all worth it because people will talk about it. Like, oh, the Torrieros did the Feast of 7 Fishes. It was rad. So
I love it.
I know we couldn't really answer that question, unfortunately, because we have the same religions as our wives. But I'd actually love to hear your guys' opinions below for those of you that have a husband or a wife that has a different religion than you. And how do you guys handle that on Christmas? Just super interested. Do you celebrate Hanukkah over Christmas? Do you celebrate both? Do you, I'd
love to know that.
Curious. So comment below, make sure to like this video, subscribe, do all the stuff you're supposed to do. Jason, great talking to you, bud. You're the man.
You too, man. And hey guys, we are actually going to be coming out with a podcast as well. So if you can't watch, we're going to make this so it's easier so you can download and listen to a podcast. So.
Yep. So that's coming soon. So anyway, have a good one. Have a great weekend, man. And I'll talk to you. I'll have some good stories next week because it's my son's birthday party on Sunday. So I'm sure I'll have something.
I love it.
All right, man.